Hello everybody and welcome to A Wild Camper's Diary. My name is Ben and the aim of this podcast is for me to offer you my thoughts on the world of wild camping, reflections and insight on my own experiences and hopefully, fingers crossed, some inspiration along the way. So, welcome to episode 11, which I have called We Can't Lose Dartmoor. So you may have noticed on social media in the last 1 to 2 months a lot of chatter, a lot of talk about Dartmoor and wild camping and possible bans and so on. So what I'm going to aim to do with this podcast is kind of pull it together to really sort of come at it from a point of not knowing anything, to let you know where things are, where we're up to, and also kind of my thoughts about the whole situation. So, if you're not from England, let me set the scene from you. In England, wild camping is actually illegal without the landowner's permission. So it's illegal for the majority of the country. It's not a criminal offence; it's actually a civil offence. Apart from one area of England in the southwest, and that area is called Dartmoor. And on Dartmoor, you can currently go into particular areas of the moor. You are advised to look at a map that is provided by the national park before you go, but you go into those areas and the idea is that you can hike, you can stay overnight as a solo backpacker with everything on your back, leave no trace, take everything with you, and that's it, and you're wild camping. It's great. And that right has existed for quite a long time. It's my understanding that people have been doing that for at least 100 years, possibly more. But if we go back a few years to 1985, that was when the Dartmoor Commons Act came into being, and that act stipulated that members of the public they were allowed to go and use the moors for outdoor recreation, which was including wild camping, and that's how people have ended up wild camping, because they believe that that is their right and that is what that they can do. And for decades now, lots of people have been doing that. You get scout groups going out, backpackers, youth groups, Duke of Edinburgh award scheme expeditions. You get the idea. So it's great, and actually this year I went down for the first time, and it was particularly great for me, actually knowing that I wasn't having to look over my shoulder, I wasn't having to arrive late, leave early, or whatever, but actually that I could actually go there and freely put my tent up and camp and look at the stars and look at those wild ponies and the beautiful tours and so on. Now, the majority of England is privately owned. The countryside, the land is privately owned, and that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. It's very complicated. It's all entwined in all sorts of nonsense, and probably a little bit difficult to understand if you come from another country. You come from Norway or Canada or somewhere like that. But that's where we're at. So we can't freely just go anywhere that we want and just wild camp. We do have to be a bit careful, and we have to, as I say, arrive late, leave early, leave no trace, and so on. So if we fast forward from 1985 to around 2020, 2021, unless you were living in a box, you might remember something about a global pandemic, and COVID and coronavirus and so on, and lockdowns. And what we noticed in the UK, in England, is that there was an increase in people who don't normally camp going out with cheap tents and cheap equipment, and having fires and whatever, and then leaving their rubbish and just clearing off. And it was very frustrating for people like me who love wild camping. We do it properly, we respect the land, we take everything with us and so on, because we kind of all got bundled into the same group. And in my opinion, the wild camping community got a bit of bad press at that time. Now, as is the case as I mentioned, in the majority of England, the Dartmoor is a national park, but it is privately owned. There are sections of it, 2,000-3,000 or more acre sections that are owned by one or two people. So there is a gentleman called Alexander Darwall, who is the owner of Stallmore. He and his wife own Stallmore, which is, my understanding, is approximately 3,000 acres, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. And he has decided to take legal action because he believes that the Dartmoor Commons Act of 1985 doesn't specifically give people the right to wild camp. My understanding is that he agrees that it permits outdoor recreation, but he does not believe that wild camping is permitted and is therefore legal. And so what he is trying to do is to make wild camping something that you have to ask permission to do. And there's been a big uproar about this. As you might imagine, there have been numerous protests in Dartmoor. There was a protest in London on the 12th of December outside the Royal Courts of Justice. And there's been a lot of online protest and voices aired and so on. So that's where I feel the internet, comes into play, doesn't it? And hashtags and social media and everything, because it means you can really get your message out there. And I've been proud to be part of that. I couldn't actually physically get along to one of the protests, but I've tried to sort of beat the drum and support online. So we got to a situation about a week or two ago where both sides of the argument were heard by the judge at the Royal Courts of Justice. So on the one side, you have Dartmoor National Park, who argue that wild camping is a form of outdoor recreation and that they promote that in Section 10 of the Dartmoor Commons Act of 1985, and therefore it should be interpreted in this way, and wild camping should be allowed to continue in the way that it has done for decades and decades. On the other side of it, you have Alexander Darwall, who believes that isn't the case. The members of the public should not be freely allowed to go onto that moor, and it should end. And if you want to camp there, then you have to ask permission. And we don't know what the outcome is going to be until the new year. My understanding is that the judge will make a decision in the new year, and he or she will let us know, what the outcome is going to be. So it's a bit of a tense time. We are very protective over Dartmoor, particularly in the outdoors community. So what might happen? Well, if the judge rules in favour of the Darwalls, then what we're concerned about in the outdoors community is the precedent that then sets, because what we do know is that there are other wealthy landowners on Dartmoor watching this very closely. And the concern is that if the judge rules in favour of the Darwalls, then other landowners might follow in the same direction, and we could be in a awful situation where this final fragment, this final little section of England, of my country, the right to wild camp is eroded and just disappears, which would be a travesty. It's been enshrined as a right for so long. There is a long history of decent members of the public, hundreds, thousands of people over the years who have camped and have benefited, immeasurably from looking at the stars, from soaking up the landscape, connecting with nature, and so on. And I got to go to Dartmoor for the first time this year, which was very exciting for me as someone from London, from East London. And I was just blown away. I thought it was incredible. I had an amazing time, and it was, I think, one of the things that really struck a chord with me was the freedom to be able to just roam and then camp and soak it up and then leave. And of course, I left no trace, and you wouldn't have known that I had been there, as is the case for 99% of people. But I think what frustrates me and frustrates others in the outdoors community is that landowners tarnish us with the same brush as the people that I will refer to as dirty campers, the people that have no idea, no clue, no respect, and who just don't care. And the reality is that the majority of people are not like that. They're not going to going to go and, you know, just throw a disposable barbecue down on the floor. They're not going to leave their tent and swan off and get the train home. That's not the reality. So we're in a bit of an unprecedented situation, and in my opinion, I can't. There is something profoundly wrong here, that we are in a situation whereby the final slither, the final fragment of England where wild camping without permission is allowed, could just be snuffed out by one person. One person. And it's, as I said, it's the precedent that then causes what will then happen. You know, what will happen next? So, the legal ruling is due to be made in the new year. It's a bit of a waiting game. We can't do much apart from cross our fingers at this stage. What then happens, I don't know. But we all know what happened many years ago on Kinder Scout. So let's see. I don't know. I don't, in my opinion, if the judge doesn't rule in favour of the park, of Dartmoor National Park, then I don't think it will be the end of it. I think people are not just going to sit down and accept this. They're really not going to. So that brings me to the end of another podcast. If you've got something to say about this issue, you've got an opinion, you've got an update, or something you want to say, then why not get in touch with me? You can reach out to me through Instagram at Londoner Outdoors. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you've enjoyed another podcast or you've got a question, then please do get in touch. So thank you very much for listening. Take care of yourself. If you are celebrating Christmas, I hope you have a great Christmas or a great holiday, and I shall see you again in the new year for another episode of A Wild Camper's Diary.